Chakracharya Srila Astotar, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, तुलसी देवी महारानी की जय, गंगा देवी की जय, यमुना देवी की जय, भक्ति देवी की जय, अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय. All glories to the single devotee. All glories to the single devotee. All glories to the single devotee. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhabhyo patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So Hare Krishna, today we are reading from Canto 2, Chapter 6, entitled Purusha Shukta Confirmed, and we're reading text 29. Tataste bratara ime Prajanam patayonava Ayajan vyaktam avyaktam Purusham susamahita Tataste Bratara ime Prajanam Patayo Nava Ayajan Vyaktam Avyaktam Purusham Susamahitaha. Word for word. Tataha, day after. Te, you. Bratara, brothers. Ime, these. Prajanam, of the living creatures. Patayaha, masters. Nava, 9. Ayajan, performed. Vyaktam, manifested. Avyaktam, non-manifested. Purusham, personalities. Susamahitaha, with proper rituals. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. My dear son, thereafter your 9 brothers, who are the masters of living creatures, performed the sacrifice with proper rituals to satisfy both the manifested and non-manifested personalities. Please repeat. My dear son, thereafter your 9 brothers, who are the masters of living creatures, performed the sacrifice with proper rituals to satisfy both the manifested and non-manifested personalities. The manifested personalities are the demigods, like the ruler of the heavenly kingdom, Indra and his associates. And the non-manifested personality is the Lord himself. The manifested personalities are mundane controllers of the material affairs, whereas the non-manifested personality of Godhead is transcendental, beyond the range of the material atmosphere. In this age of Kali, the manifested demigods are also not to be seen, for space travel has completely stopped. So both the powerful demigods and the Supreme Personality of Godhead are non-manifested to the covered eyes of the modern man. Modern men want to see everything with their eyes, although they are not sufficiently qualified. Consequently, they disbelieve in the existence of the demigods or of the Supreme God. They should see through the pages of authentic scriptures and should not simply believe their unqualified eyes. Even in these days, God can also be seen by qualified eyes tinged with the ointment of love of God. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Krishna Prasthaya Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Krishna Bhaktivedanta Swami Namo Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani. I'm a bit allergic to, so thank you. So I seek the blessings of all the devotees that I may speak something that is beneficial to us all. So here Prabhupada in this purport, he's before we start the Purusha Sukta confirmed, this chapter is actually Lord Brahma talking to his son Narad Muni, and here in the translation he's mentioning to Narad Muni about his 9 brothers who are the masters of living creatures. So who are the 9 brothers that Lord Brahma is talking about? The masters of living creatures, that means they are the progenitors, because Lord Brahma had a duty to perform wherein he had to fill the world with living creatures, so progenitors. So the 9 progenitors, they are, in the purport it mentions mentioned controllers of the material affairs. So they manage the universal affairs of the world. So these 9 are mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, 24:15 purport. That's Marichi, Atri, Angira, Pulastya, Pulaha, Kratu, Brigu, Vashishta, and Atharva. So these 9 great personalities, they were sages, and they populated the creation, and they were actually married off to Kadama Muni's 9 daughters, where Lord Brahma instructed Kadama Muni in Srimad Bhagavatam 3:24, 22 to 23. He says, your 9 daughters should be handed over to the rishis according to taste and character. So with the guidance of the parents, the daughters were married accordingly to a person who had the similar taste and character. So we see in those days that when people got married, they took guidance from the elders, from the parents, and there was a science behind it. They consulted astrology, and they saw that there was compatibility, and they also didn't just marry off people just to procreate and have sex and have children. It was according to taste and character. So according to the personality of the person, for example, a Brahmana should marry a Brahmana wife, because if a Brahmana husband marries a demoniac wife who has that nature, then there's incompatibility, and there'll be dissatisfaction, and there'll be problems in society, what to speak of within the marriage. So we can take some guidance from it, even though we are living in the age of Kali. As aspiring devotees, we have the guidance of many senior devotees, and they can objectively see the nature of people, and they can suggest. Of course, at the end of the day, it's up to the 2 individuals whether they agree or not. Because we saw, like in the 80s, where the devotees were just married off to different people, but they were not suitable. So it takes a lot of guidance and also personal introspection. So the Vedas are there as a guidance, but then we also all need to individually become leaders and see and make the decisions ourselves according to Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. So another point that Prabhupada mentions in the purport is about space travel. So here he mentions Vyakta, which is the manifested personalities, demigods, and Avyakta, non-manifested personalities, that's referring to the Supreme Lord beyond the range of the material atmosphere. So in Krishna book, it's mentioned how the demigods went to the shore of the milk ocean, and they were reciting the Purusha Shukta prayers. So even the demigods, they could not see the manifested form of Lord Vishnu. They approached Lord Brahma, and then Lord Brahma and they approached the milk ocean, and then through Lord Brahma's heart, he received the instruction that don't worry, Krishna is going to manifest in the material world, and all the demons will be annihilated. And the demigods were instructed to strategically take birth in the material world so that the demons can be annihilated. So here Prabhupada mentions that the demigods are manifested personalities, but we don't see these days that the demigods, we don't see the demigods. Just towards the end of Dwapara Yuga, there were personalities who could see the demigods. For example, Yudhishthira Maharaj, he was in charge he was the emperor of the whole world, and even great personalities and sages used to come from other planets to come and visit him and give blessings. Even the great sage Narada Muni, who is considered the 10th son of Lord Brahma, he is a transcendental spaceman, and he can travel all over the universe in the spiritual and material world. So what is that qualification that allows one to see the demigods? So before we touch on that, we'll talk about the material example. In the material world, if we want to go to a country, we need to get a visa, and we need to have the proper paperwork and qualifications. So even in the material world, we need qualification, we need proper paperwork. What to speak of going to another planet? So Prabhupada mentions how in the Srimad Bhagavatam 2.8.14 purport, he says, life in the higher planets, known as the abodes of the denizens of heaven, is obtained not by the strength of spacecraft, as is now contemplated by the inexperienced scientist, but by works done in the mode of goodness. So the qualification is based on elevated consciousness. And there's restrictions even on this planet, like we see that we need a visa, and also there's a border patrol even in the oceans. Foreigners can't enter the country. So the qualification to enter into higher planets is elevated consciousness. But we also hear in Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Bhuvana Loka. So even from the highest planet of Lord Brahma down to the lowest planet, it's a place where there's perpetual birth, death, old age and disease, even though the quality of life may be much higher. For example, in Hawaii, the weather is really good. There's no excessive heat or cold. Wherever you walk, there's fruit trees. You don't need to worry about earning your living. Everything's just there. Everything's free, peaceful. But even living in Hawaii, or even the Queen of England, they may have a higher quality of life, access to more sense gratification, more polished way of life, but it's the same. Like the animals are also having sex, so human life, it may be so-called polished, going in a skyscraper building, having nice beds and everything, but it's the same sense gratification available even to the hog. The same sex enjoyment is there in the hog and the human. It's just a polished human life. We think it's a polished sense gratification. So there's birth, death, old age and disease, and we all, even the animals, they have sex life, they procreate, and they are also working to maintain their family, and they're defending. So what's the difference? If we do the same thing, it's just considered like we are two-legged animals doing the same thing. So human life has given us the opportunity to inquire into higher consciousness. So we can inquire, who am I, who is God, and what is my relationship with God? And how can I go back to the spiritual world where there's no birth, death, old age and disease? We don't have to repeatedly come in the Ferris wheel of birth, death, old age and disease in the different types of bodies. And there are, as Prabhupada mentions in Bhagavad Gita, there are 8,400,000 species of life. So if we don't utilize this human form of life properly, we'll be degraded to a lower form of life in the next birth. And then we'll have to go on a gradual elevation of consciousness through each species again. And we don't want to do that because it's such a long time span, 8,400,000 species, and different species have different length of time, because time is relative. Like the demigods, they live for millions of years. So even though we take birth as a demigod, then we have to live for another million or so years, go through the same thing, even in the human body. Even if we are pious souls and we get an opportunity to take a human body, there's no guarantee that we won't come back in a lower grade, because Maya is so powerful. In Bhagavatam it says that Maya has two potencies, the covering potency and the pulling down potency. So we are covered, our vision is covered, and we are pulled down, the consciousness is being pulled down. So this human form of life, we don't want to miss this boat of the human form and this opportunity to elevate our consciousness. So even if we don't finish up in this lifetime, at least whatever spiritual practice we have performed, it's a eternal asset. It's in our eternal spiritual bank account. It's not like in the material world we withdraw some money and then it reduces. Devotional service and spiritual activities are eternally in our spiritual bank account. It never goes down, unless of course there's the offenses to the devotees, which is considered a mad elephant offense. So Prabhupada mentions at the end of this purport that one can see, even in these days, God can be seen by qualified eyes tinged with the ointment of love of God. So in the Brahma Samhita 538, there's a verse which says, Premanjana churita bhakti vilochanena santa sadaiva hridayeshu vilokayanti yam shama sundaram achintya guna swarupam govindam adi purusham tamaham bhajami. So that verse, the meaning is, when one has purified eyes, or when one's eyes are smeared with the ointment of love of Godhead, so with the ointment of prema. So the translation, Prabhupada says, I worship the primeval Lord Govinda, who is always seen by the devotee whose eyes are anointed with the pulp of love. He is seen in his eternal form of Shama Sundara, situated within the heart of the devotee. So in Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada mentions 9.4 purport. One can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, always within himself and outside of himself if one has developed the transcendental loving attitude towards him. And furthermore, in Srimad Bhagavatam 3.124 purport, it says, we see him, the Lord, always in it's talking about the great personalities, the devotees. They see the Lord always in their hearts due to love and devotional service rendered to the Lord. So this is the answer. How can we see the Lord? By the performance of devotional service done with love and devotion. In Nectar of Devotion it says, devotional service should be performed without any motive and should be done with love, not expecting anything in return. And in the Bhagavad Gita 4.34, it talks about how we should approach the spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, so pranipatena, and pariprashnena, inquire confidentially. So devotional service is a science. It's not blind following. We need to inquire submissively. So the process is given by Srila Prabhupada. The whole process of attending the morning program, the Mangal Aarti, we are praying to the spiritual master, worshipping him, and because he is a confidential servant of the Lord, and by worshipping the spiritual master we can progress in the spiritual life. So yesterday Ramai Swami was mentioning how we need to take proper guidance and we need to assimilate that knowledge and then practically apply it in our life. So that means assimilate itself means a practice. We need to read and then inquire and then take it within our heart and apply that knowledge. So there's the science of devotional service. It's a practical application. Service means action, and devotion means with love and devotion. So there's 3 methods of acquiring knowledge in Sri Ishopanishad. Giridhar Prabhu was mentioned this in his class a few weeks ago. There's 3 ways of acquiring knowledge in Sri Ishopanishad. So can anyone mention one of them? Yes, Shabda. Shabda Brahma, that's the highest and the final authority. That's evidence taken from the Vedas, the authentic scriptures, and its transcendental sound vibration. So it's also mentioned the other 2, Pratyaksha, that means direct sense perception. So Prabhupada mentions how the scientists, they think by the senses, by creating a spacecraft, we can travel to other planets. But our senses are very limited. We see even scientists, they can't see a tiny bacteria. We need to look through a microscope to see the bacteria. So even our senses are not perfect. And Anuma, like Prabhupada gives the example of a train. There's some villages, they never seen a train before, and the train track was built there, and the train was going to come. So some villagers came, and it was early morning, so they could see a light, and they said, oh, a train is some bright light there. So their senses are seeing a bright light. So they think a train is the bright light. Thank you. And then some stayed longer, and they could hear the sound, and they could see some form. So we can see from that example that even our senses are imperfect. And the other way of acquiring knowledge is anuman, which is inductive knowledge, hypothesis. So we see that like something we see, like it could be like this, and because of that, then we are speculating that because such and such happened, the same application is applicable to every other material. So the final authority in Sri Ishopanishad mentions Shabda Brahman. That is the final authority. So we need to take guidance from the scriptures, and then also guidance from the guru and the sadhus, from the devotees and spiritual masters. So in Bhagavad Gita, it's very importantly stressed in 434 that we need to inquire from a spiritual master. So as we progress in spiritual life, the spiritual master connects us to the parampara, so the disciplic chain directly to Krishna. So without approaching an authority, we can't gain knowledge. Even in material life, if someone wants to become a mechanic, it's not that he studies the books or even a doctor. It's not that he studies the doctor's books and then automatically he's going to do an operation. Would we go to someone who just read the books and say, oh, I'm going to do an operation on you? I read all the books. No, we need to go through the proper channels, the proper training, the authorized, the doctor's place, just like the post office. We can't just put our envelope in an ordinary box with some kid made up and they wrote post box. It won't get to the destination. So we need postal box that is put through by the post office. So that means we also need to gain some knowledge. It's not that we blindly follow. We also need to know what is the proper postal box, what is the proper hospital. So it's also a responsibility on us. Each and every one of us, Prabhupada mentions, has to become a guru. So it doesn't mean everyone has to give up family life and become guru. Guru means also the internal practice, the consciousness and the heart. So we need to follow the process that is given by Srila Prabhupada. So it's not that just because someone is a sannyasi, then only he is qualified to go back to Godhead. Prabhupada is explaining here, everyone, whether one is a brahmachari, single, or a grahastha, married life, or a vanaprastha, like they're living with the wife, but then they are performing devotional service. They have given up family life, so sex life, for creating Krishna conscious children, and they, as they're getting older, they want to dedicate more their life to serving Krishna. So we need to take proper guidance from the authorities. And I just wanted to mention in Srimad Bhagavatam 492 purport, it's mentioning how Prabhupada has given us these temples all over the world, the process, the morning program, everything. And he mentions in this purport, the Shama Sundar form of the Lord within the heart of a devotee is not imaginary. When a devotee becomes mature in his prosecution of devotional service, he sees face to face the same Shyamasundar he has thought of during the entire course of his devotional service. Since the Supreme Lord is absolute, the form in the temple and the original form in Vaikuntha, Vrindavan Dham, are all the same. They are non-different from one another. So we are worshipping the deity in the temple. So Krishna here is non-different from Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. We are given this opportunity to serve the Lord. Just like in the morning we are praying to Tulsi Devi and we are saying, Seva Adhikara Koro Nija Dasi. So we are praying that we are serving Tulsi Devi confidentially and we are asking for the service to serve Radha and Krishna. And also we just Lord Balaram's appearance day recently, we passed Lord Balaram's appearance day, and we hear from Bhagavatam that all the paraphernalia that is used in the service of the Lord is an expansion of Lord Balaram. So whatever service we do, whether we are sweeping the temple room or we are doing the paraphernalia, making garlands, making giviks, doing gardening, cooking, offering to the Lord, everything that is used in the service of the Lord is an expansion of Lord Balaram. So we shouldn't think that, oh, this service is of a lower grade and that service is of a higher grade, like deity worship. Everything depends on our consciousness. A sincere sweeper on the street who is sincerely sweeping the temple room or even outside the temple room, but thinking in their heart that I'm doing this for the Lord and the Lord's devotees, cleaning the temple, is just as equally recognized by the Lord as someone who's worshipping the Lord on the altar. So it's not that this service is higher or lower, it's a matter of consciousness, because even in serving the Lord on the altar, one's consciousness may not be right. One may be thinking, oh, the attention, everyone's looking at me, oh, look at me, I'm doing the highest service, I'm worshipping Radha Govardhandari or whatever it may be. It's not like that. So we need to see our own consciousness, and in that consciousness, when we are serving for the pleasure of Krishna and for the devotees, to that degree we are progressing in devotional life. So sometimes we see someone is doing paraphernalia or whatever service we may be doing and they're complaining, oh, I have to do all this laundry, but not thinking that, oh, this is an opportunity for me to do service for the Lord. I'm so privileged, especially at these current times, we are living at the temple. We are so fortunate to do service because devotees outside are really missing on doing service for the Lord. So it's not that, any service, paraphernalia service, cleaning the floor, everything, we need to do it conscientiously and with love and devotion because Krishna sees that. So every service we have is an opportunity to serve the Lord. It's not that I may be changing the backdrop or I'm doing paraphernalia and I just do it because I have to tick the box because I live in the temple or I live in the ashram, so I'm just ticking it, or and then there I go talk to my friends and that's it. No, the quality of the service, the heart has to be there. It's not that, here I'm doing it and that's it, and it's not. The consciousness has to be right in our heart. We need to see that this opportunity Krishna has given us, because we shouldn't take it for granted, because if we take it for granted we'll lose that opportunity. Just like the human form of life, we are given this opportunity, and if we don't practice devotional service, then if at the end of our life we may remember something else. If we, for example, we have a pet and we are remembering our pet dog or our pet cat, then we take a birth as a cat. Of course, devotional life, whatever one has performed, there's no loss, but we don't know, as Maharaj was saying yesterday, Ramai Swami, that we don't know the intricacies of one's karma, what devotional activity one has performed in previous lives. So to get an opportunity to have a human form of life, or even be born in a lower family, but a lower species of life, but near devotees. So we don't know the intricacies of karma or whatever devotional activity we perform. So we don't want to gamble with this opportunity, this human form of life, and misuse it. And like wherever we are in our spiritual life, and there will be obstacles, we may fall and we may get bruised and get hurt, but we keep getting up and we keep going, just like a child falls down but it doesn't give up even though the bruises are there. Keep walking, and we encourage each other and help each other. And if we have difficulty, I was listening to Vaisheshika Prabhu's class. He was talking, there's if we go to YouTube, ISKCON Silicon Valley, you can listen to Vaisheshika Prabhu's class on Lord Balaram, and he's talking about we need to guhyam akyati prachyati. So we need to inquire, reveal our mind in confidence. In Nectar of Instruction, it says that if we are facing some difficulty in our spiritual life, it's not that we go and advertise it and so that we feel better, because we also need to see that's also our false ego coming up. Oh, I'm honest, I say it as it is. No, that causes disturbance for our own spiritual life and for others as well in their spiritual life. So we need to confidentially speak to someone who we know is not going to go and advertise it on social media and to everyone else, because we are here to help each other, and everyone has different personalities, and it's not that everyone, even the gopis, they have their different groups, and that doesn't mean that the person is not respecting another person. It's just that different personalities. So there's a saying, birds of a feather flock together. So find your flock and get help from the people who can have similar natures and progress on the spiritual path. So let's all take this opportunity that Prabhupada has kindly given us, the acharyas, the previous teachers, everyone, the great personalities have given us this opportunity to take advantage of this knowledge. You know, in the old days, the scriptures were not there. Prabhupada spent his time translating these books even at the point of death. He was lying on his bed in Vrindavan and he was translating these books. Why is that? To give us this benediction. So we have access to all these Chaitanya Charitamrita. In the previous times they had to travel long distances. They didn't have access to these books, but here we have this treasure right in front of us. Everything's right at the tip of our hands. So whatever I'm saying, please forgive me. I'm just saying it and so that it penetrates my own heart, because I also have so many anarthas, so many bad qualities and things in our heart. But we take this opportunity. We need to also be kind of a little bit heavy on ourselves and see where we are and take guidance from the devotees and try to make some progress because we see, especially in these times, times are really difficult with COVID, everything's restricted and we see that living in the mature world is not an easy thing, and we don't want to keep coming back to this mature world and keep doing this. Of course, if there's opportunity for service and if Krishna wants us to serve him coming back, that's the consciousness of great devotees, Prabhupada's disciples, like my own spiritual master Bir Krishna Goswami and Indradumna Swami. We hear their classes, they don't mind coming back to the material world so they can serve Srila Prabhupada, and all glories to them. And some of us, we are not that qualified, and we don't want to come back to this material world. There's so much suffering every moment. Our body is giving us so much pain and suffering. We are getting suffering from the material elements. There's floods, there's disease, COVID. We are getting some suffering from other living entities, other creatures. The ants are biting us, the mosquitoes, or even, we're living in a community where everyone is on a different level, so we may not be able to get along with everyone, but we need to understand that we need to respect every living entity and try to find people who we can we have similar propensities, similar natures, and then try to progress, help each other. So I'll end there if anyone has any questions or comments, corrections. Yes, Prabhu. Maybe you can if one.
Thank you, class. I just mentioned the point about the putting the mail and authorized post box, and that like one can't just read like surgical procedures and then just perform an operation, because who would go to such a surgeon? But just like growing up in my association and stuff, like in this age, this time, it's very much that like people do have this conception that basically like man invented everything, man invented everything, like everything comes from the human brain, therefore like it's very much the case that you can just like read something and be just as qualified as someone who's had training or heard from someone who knows, so to speak. So this point, like that we come into spiritual life, is a big point of this, like descending knowledge. It doesn't like register so much when we speak this point that actually to assimilate the thing, you have to hear it from someone who's realized. I was wondering maybe if you could speak something on that.
So thank you. On your point, you mentioned my Guruma talks. I think it's my Guruma talks about how these days there's Google, or maybe Vaisheshika Prabhu, I'm not sure. I heard one class and they were saying we have Google Guru these days. As you said, everything we can learn just by going on the internet and by researching and reading the books. So in Vedic science and Vedic knowledge, we understand the knowledge is descending, it's coming from Krishna down to all the acharyas, the teachers. But in this day and age, people can't really comprehend that why should I approach an authority, because I'm getting all the knowledge at the tip of my fingers, the Google, the internet, and all the books in the library. As you mentioned rightly about the example about the doctor and the post box, but even the doctor, they may read all the books and they may gain the knowledge, but it's an advantage to them, no doubt. It is an advantage to research, like even some of the class today, I remembered some points from other classes and I Googled it, so I got that knowledge. But it also has to come from a live person who is connected to the disciplic chain. So in spiritual life, we understand that science, because if one doesn't develop that humility, so one of the important aspects of spiritual life is humility. So if one doesn't have that humility that I'm an insignificant person, but by the mercy of the spiritual master and the teachers, I'm gaining this knowledge. Like even now we hear the self-help gurus, they acknowledge, they acknowledge their teachers who they've learned from. So even these days, there's some shift in that, where they are accepting that whatever knowledge I have received I have received it from someone. So acknowledging it and showing gratitude gives us the blessings of that devotees, just like Prabhupada mentions in Bhagavad Gita 4:34, that we inquire from the spiritual master submissively and we serve him menial service, and then when the spiritual master is pleased, he can bestow blessings on us. So in material science, one may get pass through school, through university, and that, like I've experienced it myself when I went to university. Someone may be so intelligent, but even that person, someone who is sincere, who's like in the old days, they have the teachers and they have some apprentice, and that apprentice has a good nature and qualities, and they're learning from them, humbly inquiring. We can even perceive it ourselves. That doesn't mean someone has the paperwork, the qualifications, that they are more qualified, because someone who is humbly serving, even for example the mechanic, if he's learned from childhood, he has the same nature from his father, or someone who's a painter, but Malochan Prabhu is 3 generations, they've learned it. So someone may have gone through some professional education, that is an advantage in itself, yes, but that is not a qualification alone. There has to be submission, humility and inquiry, and showing gratitude to the persons we have learned from, because they give the blessings. There's a subtle science involved in spiritual life that we can't perceive it materially. It's that the blessing is transferred from the heart of a devotee to someone else's heart. There's a saying, bhakti comes from bhakti. So if we don't like these days, if we don't approach someone who has that knowledge with the right attitude and the right consciousness, one may be externally, going up the ladder, so to speak, or may have certain things, but if the quality is not there, you see, I think Ramaya Swami mentioned yesterday, he was saying, the example, like people want to show off these days, they want to show off, look at my situation, but the power of time will tell itself. We see that over time, we see the actions, it can't stay, there's no stability in it, it won't sustain. What is sustaining is the qualities that we develop, as Prabhupada mentions, the qualities that we all need to aspire for: humility, tolerance, patience, compassion. So that is sustained, we see it sustained over time when someone has internalized and practicing from the heart, not just externally. So the knowledge, there's no loss, of course, gaining that external knowledge and the external practice, but if that internal is not there, it's not lasting. And at the end of the life, we also hear that without devotional service to the Lord, without loving devotion, then we can't go back to Him or progress on in another life, going back home, back to Godhead. So thank you for that very important point. Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.